Well, I was going to make a review of this expanded universe novel, but literature is so uncouth when we have the brilliance of Andor and its deep themes, characters, characterizations, and dark allegories of our modern day. It's really a show that we need today because it speaks to the evil fascism going on. So, how can I speak of such lowbrow things as reading books when I have a Disney Plus show to talk about? I'm sure you all agree that we would all love to hear about every minute of Tony Gilroy's masterpiece. After all, remember that Luthen sacrificed everything. The greatest character in Star Wars history. Let's remake all of Star Wars with Gilroy. Hear, hear. You uncouth f***ing swine. I f***ing hate you all. You're all a bunch of f***ing your mother's f***s. I'm just going to f*** you all like a f***. Does nobody appreciate Gilroy? In book number 4 of the New Jedi Order series, we see the introduction of the religious Vong with a stunning new villain. We see the reintroduction, in a way, of Han, one of our original trilogy heroes, but he's back in the fight now, having overcome, or at least partially overcome, the grief, the loss of Chewbacca. And we see continued droid genocide and continued incompetence by New Republic leadership. In Chapter 1, we see the introduction of Harar, the main villain of the piece, who is a religious leader on the Vong, and who is seen, of course, slaughtering droids, sending them into a sun, whatnot, but he also takes a keen interest in the dark side of the Force, having studied the Jedi and their role in this conflict, seeing how they inspire the civilians that he captures, and knowing that they may be the primary enemy of the Vong as their invasion advances. Next, they introduce a somewhat strange plot line that didn't totally connect with me about 3PO questioning what happens to a droid when they die and whatnot, but it's all under the auspice of the funeral of Chewie, and he's contemplating death. So at least in the first scene here, it makes sense. It's kind of a thing that they carry throughout the book. They use it a little bit for humor. But we're mainly seeing Han overcome the grief of losing Chewbacca here, at least moving to the next stage of that grief, as he finally decides after months, it's time for me to get back in the fight, time for me to stop being a drunkard, time for me to stop hating my kids, especially Anakin, mainly Anakin, for what he did, abandoning Chewie on Cern Padal. But really, he goes through that journey throughout the course of this book. The journey begins at the funeral right here. Han cleverly negotiates his way out of a Wookiee life debt that has apparently now passed to Lobaka, who's a character we just now are introduced to, or at least me starting in this series is first introduced to. This is where we see the Vong begin to first piece together that it seems like there's a lot of information missing about these Jedi, and it was most likely due to these Sith that we've been learning about. We also learn that their world ships have been deteriorating greatly. There's a lot of lights that don't work. There's a lot of stuff just malfunctioning and whatnot, or just deteriorating in general in their journey between galaxies. So they're perhaps a little bit more vulnerable, a little bit more desperate than what we've been led to believe in the limited amount we've seen of their inner circle through the first 3 novels. The first female Vong of any note that we've seen introduced just so happens to be part of the Deception sect of their church. Then Nome Anor is reintroduced into the story, and he comes up with a clever plan. We need to take out the Jedi. We need to send Alon, this priestess, in as a fake defector. She's going to deceive the Jedi into a meeting in which she will release a gas that will most likely kill her, but it will also take out a good number of the Jedi and especially their leadership. Of course, in order to get this in with the Jedi, she's going to have to feed them some false information and let them score a nice Pyrrhic victory on a planet so that she can gain their trust, get into the inner circle, and the New Republic can be effectively tricked. But the Vong don't really account for the intelligence of certain characters who may be getting just over their friend's death. We see the totally incompetent Borsk Failure. We call him Borsk Failure here because he should have stopped this invasion day one, planet one. It should have never happened. It would have never happened if I had been Chancellor. And now you have billions and billions of people. We have big, beautiful capital ships. He refused to use them, and now we paid a lot. We paid a lot for that, and it's all on him. He is a total disaster. Borsk Failure. He starts blaming the Jedi for the start of the war and talking about how the Vong are advancing in past the Outer Rim and there's some Inner Rim worlds. They're starting to get a little bit worried here. Luke and Mara have a nice discussion on the Force and life as Luke talks about how, you know what, I've questioned my decisions over the last few years, and then they start getting into all of his past love interests, who strangely all seem to be women. Go figure. We get a great emotional scene on the Falcon of Han just grieving Chewie, just continuing to go through this 4 books now of this arc of him overcoming this grief, trying to overcome it just a little bit so he can get back to functional as he sees that co-pilot's chair on the Falcon and finds it incredibly hard to continue. We get introduced to Roa, who is Han's old smuggler buddy, who lost his wife to the Vong, just like Han lost Chewie to the Vong. And they decide to team up and go after the Peace Brigade, who has another person who they both used to know, who is teaming up with the Vong in order to feed them prisoners, feed them information throughout the galaxy. They're human defectors, effectively. We finally get a sort of idea of the scale of this invasion, where some of the New Republic leadership meets and they discuss, the Vong are about 1,000 capital ships. Some of them are rivaling super star destroyers. They've taken about 30 systems of the galaxy thus far, so it's more of just a general kind of tidying up, kind of giving you the scope of what we're facing here. Han keeps everybody in the dark as far as where he's going, including himself, as he doesn't even ask Roa until they're already on their way. But as he says his goodbyes, Anakin visits him and gives him something that will be very important later. It's a survival tool, a sort of multi-tool Swiss Army knife type thing that Chewie actually made and Anakin's worked on a little bit. And this ends up being a big tie-in both emotionally and to the overall arc of this story, which is mainly about Han in this book. And the 2 big ways that Alon and Vergere, who's sort of a person who is dependent or attached to Alon, reveal to sort of get in with the New Republic and get past all their spies and suspicions, are that A, they do give them information on a victory that the New Republic gains, but B, they reveal that they have a cure for a certain disease that the Vong unleashed before they ever invaded the galaxy. And of course, this is a disease that Mara's suffering from, which the Vong know about, having had Nome Anor tell them, and so they know that this will bait the Jedi into their meeting. Han and Roa end up tracking the Peace Brigade to a orbital station just above Ord Mantell, a giant ring. And they end up getting thrown in the brig because they get in a big bar fight with an old favorite from the OT, Bossk. Luckily, Han knows the boss of this place, and they end up getting kind of bailed out of there along with Roa right before the Vong attack with a giant serpent that sucks up a bunch of people, including Roa. Han, always being a guy who can make friends, teams up with a certain member of the Rin species, who are kind of known for always getting chased out of wherever they move in. They don't even know what their home planet was anymore because they've always been nomadic and ostracized in communities, not trusted, Jews and gypsies. And Han ends up getting one of these guys to help him out piloting whenever this Vong attack comes. And he almost flies towards this giant serpent that's been sucking everybody up, but he's talked out of it, and in a situation very similar to when Anakin had to leave Chewie, Han is forced to leave his friend. Luckily, I believe Roa is still alive. The Jedi have a meeting about whether to meet with the Vong or not, and under the very ill-advised advice of Kip Duran, who is very eager to meet with these, Vong, who we really shouldn't trust, the Jedi decide, let's go ahead and meet with them, why not? Han ends up running into the Rin that he had run into before, named Droma, who explains to him that the Rin actually invented sabacc. And while playing sabacc, Han actually says, "I'll take a handful of luck to a cargo hold of wisdom," which is kind of his character in one quote. And then Droma ends up explaining to him that the Sabak cards, they weren't really initially used for gambling. They were more used for tarot cards in the traditional sense of how we would relate to it. And so he ends up kind of reading Han's fortune through the cards and giving him some foreshadowing for later in this book and probably later in the series as well. Peace Brigade and the Vong agent with them unfortunately didn't get the memo that these defectors, as they would be known, are supposed to get to the Jedi. So they say, hey, let's get in the good graces of the Vong and let's rescue them from the Queen of Empire where these Republic spies are escorting them back to the core world. So they end up killing all the New Republic agents who end up getting to Han just in time and telling him, hey, we've got some defectors. However, there's other Vong trying to prevent the retrieval of these defectors because they know, wait a minute, we want them to succeed in their defection because we need them to get to the Jedi. So we're going to kind of try to rescue them, but also not. And if the Peace Brigade dies, which they do, it's okay. Han ends up having one of his biggest and kind of subtlest character moments in that he has to choose saving Mara over simply pursuing vengeance on all the Vong and the Peace Brigade. And he chooses to go try and get Vergere and Alon back because he knows that they have potentially the cure to Mara's disease. And as Han and Droma board the Falcon, we get one of the most heartbreaking scenes in any of these books so far, where Droma, as he sits in that co-pilot seat, says, you have to be a person of considerable dimensions to fill this seat. And Han's just crying, and he says, yeah, you would have had to be. Of course, meaning it in a different way, as he has sort of a trick of a mind where he thinks he sees his friend for a moment. He gets a vision of Chewie in that seat. So Han, showing his intelligence, because he's intelligent, he's a great pilot, despite what some recent movies would have you believe, he actually susses out pretty quick that these refugees and defectors from the Vong are not so much that. He goes, wait a minute, why do these ships keep missing us? This all seems a little too coincidental. We came to rescue them and all their captors were dead. Like, what's up with this? And so Alon goes, oh crap, the jig is up. Goes ahead and unleashes some of that poison gas she was planning on using on the Jedi. And Han gets a little hint in the back of his mind, says, don't breathe. And he goes, okay. He pulls out the rebreather on the multi-tool that Chewie and Anakin had given him. And he manages to avoid death. Alon dies. Vergere escapes, but only after giving him a vial of her goo, which had been established as a healing mechanism earlier when she used it on one of the New Republic agents. And Droma says, she's part of a species that's actually of our galaxy. So I'm not sure if she was forced into this or if that was part of one of the Vong's pre-invasion forces that had gotten her. But there's something up with this. Maybe we can trust it. So now we get two fairly large payoffs right at the end of this book, which is, one is kind of a plot thing, which is Mara ingests that goo. She gets all the goo inside of her, and she ends up at least feeling healed, and Luke sees that she's healed through the Force. So I am led to believe that this is the actual cure, that she is okay. She got the space cancer gone. Awesome, because I really like Mara. Didn't want her to disappear. And we got a lot more books to go in this series, so if she kept deteriorating, she would have. And then we also get a big emotional payoff when Han embraces Anakin and he says, basically, I would have died without what you had. And basically, I don't blame you for Chewie anymore. I'm not being irrational about it. He never really he always acknowledged that it was logical to do what he did and that they all would have died. He figured out pretty quick. But just the illogicalness of emotion was clouding his judgment in the immediate aftermath, and he finally forgives his son, and he embraces his son. He basically says hey, I'm over it, dude, and I understand, and I still love you, son. And that's a father-son bond that I know we won't get in anything Disney Star Wars, so it's incredibly jarring and wonderful to see here. We get a little tease with the Vong after these emotional payoffs about, they're sort of getting depleted as far as Belkadon and Cernpit all goes and growing new forces, so they've got to move And they're sort of cordoned off, so they decide, let's go into Hutt space. They've struck a deal with the Hutts. So I'm guessing that's where they'll veer their invasion next in an effort to get around whatever blockades the New Republic is finally managing to set up. So we'll see you next time. I didn't enjoy this one as much as the others. It's more of a 3 out of 5 because it has one really good storyline versus like the 2 or 3 that were going on in the previous books. But still, really awesome emotional payoffs for Han. Great to, the Jedi were sort of sidelined, but we got a great payoff with them at the end. Luke and Mara having another just affection-filled scene. The Han and Anakin dynamic, while briefly touched on directly, was indirectly fed into and developed as far as Han's emotional development to get it in there. And it shows that you can keep going forward with a character. You don't have to rewind and reset and try and do the same arc all the time. This is completely different Han Solo than anything I've ever experienced before. And it's a great continuation of the OT and a continuation of him now as a father and having to deal with new obstacles and new losses and new everything while this crazy invasion is going on. And the action feeds the character and the character feeds the action. And that's how storytelling should work. Take notes, Disney. We'll see you guys next time.